It may not be Monday, but hey, we're going to sit down and talk with the mayor today.
Yeah, so we want to bring her in now. She's joining us virtually this morning. Welcome in, Mayor Jones. First, I want to get this started about the arrest of a former city council staffer, 36-year-old Brian Naylor. So police, we have learned, says he left a threatening note towards District 9 Councilwoman Misty Spears' office. We wanted to know what your thoughts are on this, and can you speak to the security response that happens in cases like this?
Yeah, well, thank you. Good morning. Look, this is an unfortunate incident. You spoke to the councilwoman yesterday about the incident, and look, there's just no room for this certainly not in our community, but also certainly not at City Hall. My goodness. So I'm very thankful that the individual was apprehended, and that frankly, the city's business can continue. There's just no room for these kind of frankly, threats against any staff member, regardless of the issue. So I'm thankful that there was a quick response.
All right, and Mayor, this is something that's made headlines. We've been talking about this for a week or so, with the effort to move city elections in off years from May to November. You guys are going to talk about this and possibly vote on it Thursday. How have those talks gone so far?
Well, look, I've spearheaded this because I think this makes a lot of sense. This saves us money, right? The city manager's initial estimate was that this would save us between $800K and $1 million. The exact savings, though, is not fully known until you know how many folks move over to November. But there clearly are cost savings to this. I think as importantly, though, right, you've got higher turnout. Folks associate voting with November. And we have seen time and time again that if it's between Fiesta and voting, right, Fiesta always wins. For context, I think I shared this last week, but when you look at the top 50 cities, we are in the bottom 5 when it comes to turnout for municipal elections. I mean, we're dealing with a $4 billion budget. Right? The better, the more of our neighbors that we hear from, the better our government works and the better our democracy works. The reason we are taking this up on Thursday is because the state law that changed said, hey, cities, if you want to do this, you can do it. But you got to take action by the end of the year. So we are, again, look, we had a good discussion last week, and I think, we will take action this Thursday. And I hope my colleagues join me in this effort to, one, make sure we save money and hear from as many of our neighbors as possible.
You also had a very big meeting this past Friday regarding federal funding. So we wanted to know, Mayor, how did that tabletop discussion go? Yeah,
so we brought together, I mentioned that during the budget season, I was very concerned about how we were essentially, hearing from our community partners, but also gathering the data to help us understand what risks we may need to mitigate as a result of not only potential losses in federal funding to our city budget, but how some of those same federal cuts may impact some of our community partners on things like housing, on things like mental health, on things like testing and immunizations, right? Half of the city's public health budget comes from federal funding. So not only are we quite vulnerable to those federal cuts immediately to the budget, but as we all know, the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill is coming. It's not if, it's when, right? Cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, and SNAP. So I'm very thankful the city staff brought together about 40 community partners, and again, a range of folks. We had an ISD partner there. We had, again, folks from mental health, folks that work on healthcare disparities on the South Side. So a really good opportunity for folks to come together and think through these questions that frankly are keeping all of us up at night. Right? What if we lose that money? What does that mean for the most vulnerable? So now there will be a report that is written, and we will review that in January, and that'll help us understand the risks, but more importantly, think about how we can mitigate those moving forward.
All right, it's something else that we've talked a lot about, and you've made your point, your view on this pretty clearly, but we've gotten several reports that TxDOT has officially denied the city's request for an exemption to the rainbow crosswalks. Can you confirm that? And if so, how long did the state give the city to remove it?
So we were that request, the request for exemption was in fact denied. Again, that was not a surprise, right? I said very early on I was not optimistic about that, just because I know the intent here is frankly something other than public safety. Just like when I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it wasn't about good order and discipline, right? So we just got to deal with what we're dealing with at this point. And there was not a deadline, but we know that we need to do that expeditiously. So. But again, we continue to also work with our community, members of my LGBTQ community, to hear about other ways in which we can uplift and ensure our LGBTQ folks feel seen and feel safe and feel included. And there's a number of ways to do that. And as I have shared, and I know many in my community feel the same way, which is we've got to play the long game, right? We know that there are some real, frankly, retaliation that would come to the most vulnerable in our community. So we've got to play the long game. We've got to pick our battles. And so I'm thankful that the LGBTQ community has already raised additional ways in which, frankly, we can show that we are a diverse and united community in other ways.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, for your time this morning. We appreciate it.